This is when Gen X ruled the multiplex, the films that shaped the MTV generation. The English rockers Pink Floyd, who rose to global prominence in the late 60s and early 70s, weren't really MTV darlings in the sense that video-friendly artists like Prince and Michael Jackson and Madonna and Duran Duran were, but they still had a tremendous influence over the development of many of us Gen Xers, not only through their music, but particularly through their 1982 film Pink Floyd The Wall. Pink Floyd The Wall was directed by Sir Alan Parker, then known for directing 1978's Midnight Express and 1980's Fame, who would go on to direct many acclaimed films, including The Commitments, Evita, and Angel Heart, before his death in July of this year. The screenplay was by Pink Floyd co-founder Roger Waters, and it's loosely based on his life, which was also the subject of Pink Floyd's 1979 concept album, The Wall, which, over 40 years later, remains one of the best-selling albums in the United States. Cartoonist and illustrator Gerald Scarfe had a long history of collaborating with Pink Floyd. For the band's 1980-1981 tour in support of The Wall, Scarfe designed a number of elaborate and gorgeous animated pieces. Scarfe expanded upon his animation for Parker's film, which contains about 15 minutes of pretty spectacular animated sequences. Between Waters, Parker, and Scarfe, Pink Floyd The Wall was a collaboration between three brilliant and strong-willed individuals who each had a very strong idea of the direction the film should take, and to no one's surprise, they clashed terribly. This was a notoriously acrimonious production. Everyone was utterly miserable while filming it, and yet Pink Floyd The Wall turned out brilliantly. We open in the corridor of a posh hotel in the present day where a housekeeper is going about her duties. She knocks on the door of a room but receives no answer. I should note here that there is very little dialogue in the film. The album The Wall is essentially a rock opera in which the entire narrative unfolds through song. The members of Pink Floyd don't appear in the film either as musicians or actors, and so the film is structured as more of a series of music videos that tell a single story, even though that story isn't always told in chronological order. We shift to a bunker during World War II, where a soldier played by James Lawrenson lights his cigarette from an oil lamp in the darkness while the sounds of war draw closer, accompanied by the Pink Floyd song When the Tigers Broke Free Part 1. Back at the hotel, inside a room, a rock star named Pink sits motionless in a chair, apparently catatonic, his cigarette burned down almost to his knuckles. Pink is played by Irish rocker and political activist Sir Bob Geldof, then best known as the frontman of the Boomtown Rats. He was picked for this role on the strengths of his performance in the Boomtown Rats video I Don't Like Mondays. 2 years after The Wall, in the winter of 1984, Geldof and Ultravox frontman Midge Ure would organize Band Aid, a mega group of famous singers who came together to record the smash hit single Do They Know It's Christmas to raise awareness of and money for famine in Ethiopia. Band Aid kickstarted the social awareness and charity-mindedness of music artists that would dominate the second half of the 80s, which would encompass Geldof's Live Aid, plus USA for Africa, Farm Aid, and Herein Aid. Geldof is not an actor, but he is very effective as Pink. The role calls for him to vacillate between catatonia and extreme rage, and he handles those transitions very well. When the housekeeper unlocks his hotel room door, Pink slips into a series of rapid-fire memories about screaming fans, London riots, and the experiences of the previously glimpsed soldier, who turns out to be Pink's long-dead father, on the battlegrounds of World War II. Pink also imagines himself as a Hitler-esque fascistic leader singing In the Flesh to a rapt audience of fans. Back on the World War II battlefields, Pink's father meets a brutal end when he's bombed by enemy fighters. The Thin Ice plays over scenes of post-battle desolation as the injured, dead, and dying are moved from the battlefield. We move forward in time again and see present-day Pink lying in the pool of his hotel suite in Los Angeles, bleeding and writhing in agony. Back in World War II-era London, Pink's mother, played by Christine Hargreaves, naps in the garden while ignoring her infant son. We skip ahead a couple years to post-war London, where Pink, now a small boy played by David Bingham, sits in a church with his recently widowed mother while Another Brick in the Wall Part 1 plays. Pink plays with a toy fighter plane while his mother, deep in grief over her dead husband, seems barely aware of him. Later, Pink's mother leaves her young son at a park where he gravitates towards random men in desperate search of a father figure. Left alone at home, he explores his mother's bedroom and finds his father's army uniform and papers, while When the Tigers Broke Free Part 2 plays. From there we go into the first of Gerald Scarfe's spectacular animated sequences. This one is scored to Goodbye Blue Sky, and it's an ominous and stylized depiction of the effects of war on the UK. Humanoid creatures in gas masks cower in terror. The Union Jack turns into white crosses that leak blood into the gutters. Scarfe grew up in London during the Blitz, and this sequence draws inspiration from his experiences as a small boy forced to wear a gas mask while hiding in cellars during air raids. An adolescent Pink, now played by Kevin McKeon, explores some train tracks with a couple of young friends. Pink places one of his father's bullets on the train tracks as the train approaches and watches as the bullet explodes into sparks. In the dark of the tunnel, young Pink imagines the train is filled with prisoners heading to a concentration camp, and also with dozens of school kids wearing stylized masks that obscure their features, which is a reference to the widespread evacuation of British children from the cities during World War II. Even though the war is over, and even though Pink, like Roger Waters, who was born in 1943, is too young to remember most of it, the war has reshaped the UK, and its after effects have imprinted themselves on Pink. From there, we go into Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, the most well-known track from the album, reaching #1 in both the US and the UK, and becoming the unofficial anthem of angry and disaffected schoolchildren around the globe. At school, young Pink is ridiculed by his teacher, played by Alex McAvoy, for writing a poem, which is actually the lyrics to Pink Floyd's Money from their 1973 album, The Dark Side of the Moon. The teacher mocks him in front of his classmates. Pink falls into a daydream in which all the students wear faceless masks while being forced to march into a meat grinder that turns them into a homogenized paste. In Pink's fantasy, the children rebel in the classroom and overturn their desks. The school kids break windows and burn down the school, then drag their hapless teacher towards a bonfire, clearly intending to throw him in. Back in the present, Pink sits in his hotel suite and tries to call his wife, who doesn't answer. While Mother plays, Pink flashes back to his childhood again, where he remembers his mother coddling him during a childhood illness. This is interspersed with scenes of adult Pink neglecting his long-suffering wife, who is played by Eleanor David. We see a series of scenes of their relationship, including a flashback to their mod 60s wedding. Due to his busy career, Pink has been neglecting his wife. In his emotional and physical absence, she takes up with a man that she meets at a nuclear disarmament rally because this is 1982. Pink calls his wife Collect from the US while he's on tour and is devastated when her new lover picks up the phone. This leads into another gorgeous and spooky animated sequence set to What Shall We Do Now? If you've never seen Pink Floyd The Wall, I urge you to at least check out these sequences, which are deeply cool and unsettling, and will insert their tendrils into your brain like a parasitic creature, but in a good way. This sequence starts out with a pair of flowers, clearly representing Pink and his wife, engaged in a vicious and sexually charged battle. The flower representing his wife dominates him and turns into a predatory bird, as a wall made up of commercial products bisects and ravages the land, all while humans grow more predatory, greedy, and violent. After a concert, a cluster of pretty young groupies party with the security guards and roadies to gain access to the backstage area, while Young Lust plays. The groupies include Jenny Wright, whom we just saw in St. Elmo's Fire, and Nell Campbell, often known as Little Nell, who is best known for playing Columbia in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Actress Joanne Whalley, well known for films like Scandal and Willow, in which she co-stars with her one-time husband Val Kilmer, also puts in an appearance as one of these groupies. But I couldn't tell you which one, because I am rubbish at identifying people, and the internet has been absolutely no help with this. The unnamed groupie played by Jenny Wright catches Pink's laconic eye and accompanies him to his hotel suite. Pink lapses into a catatonic state despite her best efforts to grab his attention. Eventually, he explodes into unexpected fury, and as the groupie cowers in terror, he destroys the room to One of My Turns. Pink shatters mirrors, smashes guitars, and hurls a television out the window. Afterward, a bloody Pink floats in his suite's pool to Don't Leave Me Now. He hallucinates about being attacked by the vicious flower bird that represents his wife. To the strains of Another Brick in the Wall Part 3, he flashes through the events of his life that have led to the creation of the wall, the psychological barrier that traps him in his catatonia. This is where we first met Pink, in his hotel suite, his cigarette burning down to his knuckles, staring into the void while Goodbye Cruel World plays. Is There Anybody Out There plays while Pink loses his mind in his shattered hotel suite and builds elaborate collages out of the debris. While Nobody Home plays, he shaves off all his body hair and facial hair and will go around with scabby eyebrows for the rest of the film. Catatonic in front of the television, he imagines himself as a child wandering through battlefields and wartime hospitals until he comes across an insane adult version of himself. Young Pink then visits the train station where soldiers return home from the war and reunite with their loved ones as the song Vera plays. Vera is about World War II era singer Dame Vera Lynn, who was known as Britain's wartime sweetheart and who died in June of this year at age 103. As young Pink realizes his father isn't on the train, the crowd bursts in to bring the boys back home. In Pink's hotel room, his manager bursts in and finds Pink sluggish and unresponsive while Comfortably Numb plays. His manager is played by Bob Hoskins, well known for films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, whom we saw several weeks ago in Brazil. The hotel manager is played by character actor Michael Ensign, whom you probably know as the hotel manager in Ghostbusters. Pink flashes back to a child memory of finding and trying to care for a sick rat. Young Pink himself gets sick, and while he's recuperating, the rat, left all alone, dies. In the hotel suite, paramedics are called, and Pink is injected with something that rouses him enough to perform. A drugged-up Pink hallucinates en route to his gig that he's decomposing into some kind of grotesque creature. He tears off the decayed skin and reveals that he is transformed into a fascist dictator. His concert is an angry and scary fascist rally, similar to those in Nazi Germany, where he's flanked by dozens of uniformed skinheads. And then, as Run Like Hell plays, his followers are set loose on an unsuspecting London, where they start riots and rape and pillage. The production hired 360 genuine skinheads to film this sequence, which added to the dark chaos of an already out-of-control production. We're not meant to take this whole Pink becomes a Nazi sequence literally. Pink is hallucinating because he's stripping balls from whatever the doctor shot him up with to get him in good enough shape to perform. But in his hallucination, he's become the ultimate boogeyman of his childhood. Nazis killed his father and wreaked chaos across Europe. Mostly, though, Roger Waters wants us to be aware of the parallels between rock concerts and fascist rallies. In both, a huge crowd is whipped up into a screaming and singular frenzy by a charismatic leader, and that passionate fury can explode into violence. While Waiting for the Worms plays, Pink drifts into another hallucinatory sequence in which goose-stepping hammers march in formation. Overwhelmed by what he's brought about, Pink cowers in a men's room stall and yells for it all to stop. He drifts into one final animated sequence set to the trial, in which he finds himself on trial for the crime of showing feelings. The court is presided over by a grotesque worm-like judge, while horrifying creatures representing figures from his life, his wife, his mother, his teacher, testify against him. The judge sentences Pink to a final punishment, having his protective wall torn down. The wall explodes into bricks. In the last scene, we see modern London recovering from riots, as small children pick up bricks and dump out Molotov cocktails. We don't know what ultimately happens to Pink, whether he can even survive without his wall. And the film is too cynical for that to seem likely, but it does end on a gently optimistic note of recovery. I first saw Pink Floyd The Wall when I was probably too young for it. I think I was about 10 or 11. But despite being very serious and grim and sometimes surreal and unsettling, it's honestly pretty accessible. Even though it's a film that's told out of chronological order, even though parts of it are animated sequences that are laden with dark symbolism, even though part of it is clearly a hallucination, even though there's very little dialogue, it's still remarkably easy to follow and to respond to. It has a strong and simple narrative. A man grows up in post-war London with a dominant mother and an absent father, becomes a rock star, sees his marriage fall apart, spins out of control, and is eventually driven inside himself by the isolation of fame. As I said at the start, Pink Floyd The Wall is a film about Roger Waters' life and his very specialized experiences. Women do not fare well in The Wall. The two women most responsible for shaping Pink, his mother and his wife, are both literally depicted as predatory, murderous, smothering creatures. These are Roger Waters' personal experiences as an unhappy and fatherless child in post-war London who grew up to become a rock star, and he's ungenerous towards these fictional representations of the women in his life, but his experiences are not meant to be universal. One of the concepts symbolized by The Wall is the barrier that fame creates between musicians and their fans. None of us are world-famous rock stars, I'm assuming, and yet, despite Roger Waters' very rare and specific set of circumstances, The Wall is still very relatable. In the 80s, there was something very appealing to young Gen Xers about The Wall. Very broadly speaking, we are a moody and introspective bunch, strongly independent and prone to feeling isolated. Many of us were, and still are, keenly aware of societal requirements to keep our true feelings hidden behind a wall of outward disaffection, and a feeling like at some point that wall is not going to hold and you're going to explode. The dark and seething anger of Pink Floyd The Wall gives a voice to those specific feelings and prevents us all from becoming comfortably numb. Next time, we're going to explore the anatomy of a box office disaster with the hilariously ill-advised bomb Howard the Duck. Thank you for being here with me today, and I will see you later.